Hi everyone, thank you for coming to my book talk. And today I'm going to be talking about a book that I recently read called Small is Beautiful: Economics as if People Mattered. And this book was written by a German economist named E.F. Schumacher. And it was actually published in 1973. So by this point, it's almost 50 years old, but I still think that it had a lot of relevant themes to our society today. So, first, I'm going to talk a little bit about just what the book covers and its main themes. So, in the book, the author outlines some of the key problems that he thinks are facing our world today in his time period, which included the use of natural capital or our natural resources as if they were expendable income and not a finite resource that we're eventually going to deplete. So, we need to use them more conservatively. And he also says that our society generally just values profit at the expense of everything else, like health or beauty or the permanence of our ecosystem and the permanence of our companies and things, and above all, people. So that is a problem. And he also says that one of our main problems in society is our rampant materialist and consumerist culture. And he argues that we need to start instilling a new set of metaphysical doctrines that teach self-sacrifice and restraint and inspire people to try to support society as a whole instead of just trying to gain profit for their own benefit. And he also argues that as we become more and more technologically advanced and automated, our society actually becomes worse off even if we have more profit, because it means that people are going to be less employed doing actual productive work. And he thinks that men are happiest when they are being creative, useful, and productively engaged with both his hands and his brains. And that is a quote from the book. So he thinks that even if it means a reduction in production, we should move back to a more labor-intensive way of producing goods that's more hands-on. And then he talks a little bit about socialism and collective ownership, and he argues that true socialism is more of a mindset of considering outside motives other than just profit and funneling some of the good that your company does back into society. And it's not so much about nationalizing corporations, which is kind of the modern train of thought. And then he gives a real world example of a British company that converted into a commonwealth and converted to collective ownership and actually had an increase in their staff and profit and was able to donate a lot of money to causes outside of their company. So he thinks that that's kind of a model that some businesses can go off of. So I think that this book is really important and a good read for anyone who lives in a Western society like in the United States, especially people who are doubtful that we're on the verge of an energy crisis and can continue our current ways of life unchecked, because this book really does a good job of pointing out just how finite our resources are and how quickly we're burning through them. And he noticed all of this even 50 years ago, and I think it's even more relevant today because really not a whole lot has changed in the way that we get our energy. Even though we're starting to invest more and utilize more renewable energy, we're still very reliant on fossil fuels. And I think you can also see the importance of this book in some of the shifts that we've had in our modern world, such as some of the trends to shopping local, which is very much an idea that Shoemaker supports, and kind of having more sense of awareness of where our products come from and being choosier as consumers, such as some of like the more recent Amazon boycotts and things like that, because we're not happy with the way that they treat the workers. That is kind of an example of something that Shoemaker talks about, just how companies shouldn't just value profit as the end-all be-all. And this book also kind of taught me a lot about socialism, because previously I had mostly conceived it as just nationalizing businesses, and I had a fairly negative viewpoint of socialism. But after reading this book, it made me more aware of the fallacy of like the self-made man, because really, if corporations and business owners didn't have a lot of the public infrastructure like roads or educated workers that are provided to them by external sources, then they would not be able to become nearly as rich as they are able to in our society. So really, it's not fair that they get such a huge share of the profit. And I think that we need to look more into collective ownership like Shoemaker talks about. So overall, kind of like I mentioned, I think that now we are becoming more conscious as consumers about where our products come from, and we're becoming more environmentally conscious and more aware. Most people are becoming more aware that we need to kind of shift away from our current energy production, the way that we produce energy. But I do think we still have a lot to do as far as reducing income inequality and economic inequality, because that's a big issue that Schumacher talks about in his book, and we actually have like growing inequality in the US. So, and then I was a little skeptical of one of his main claim, which was that men are happiest when they are working with their hands and producing labor, or doing labor to produce something, because I don't really think that that's true. I think that, at least in our society, people are kind of hardwired to care about themselves. So if we try to convert to a more labor intensive way of producing goods, we would have to give up a lot of things, a lot of the material goods that we have today. And I'm not sure if people would be happy with that, even if they would be working and being productive. I still think most people would not be willing to give up some of the material things that we do have in our society now, just for the overall good in society. And another reason for that is because a lot of people still believe that, in the idea of like a self-made man, where if you start a company, then that company is yours and you put in all the work, so you should get to keep the vast majority of the profit, which I don't necessarily agree with. So I think that we're still kind of a far way from this sort of collective ownership society, and a society with new values that Shoemaker would like to see. But I think some good first steps we could take in policy would be imposing a higher progressive income tax rate and subsidizing clean energy, as well as subsidizing small and more diverse farms, because these could help people. This could help us have a more equitable distribution of income and would be more environmentally conscious. So thank you.